Hello, and thank you for staying with me. There are seasons in life that aren't loud, but somehow take more from us than we ever expected. And today, I want to tell you a story about a winter like that, and the people who had to choose how to keep going. And maybe, somewhere in this story, you'll find something your heart has never quite dared to face. That winter didn't arrive with thunder. There was no warning, no clear sign. Just one morning, people woke up and realized the world had changed. The wind began to sweep across Wyoming like it no longer belonged to humanity. It didn't howl. It didn't rage. It simply existed. Cold, relentless, impossible to escape. The snow didn't fall in a storm, but in thin layers, stacking over one another like repeated lies, until you could no longer tell what was real. The long roads slowly disappeared. Old footprints were erased. And there was a rule that everyone who had ever survived a winter here understood. When the road disappears, so does hope. Have you ever wondered how long a person can endure the cold before they begin to forget why they're still alive? In that endless white void, there were 12 children. They weren't together by choice. They stayed together because if they separated, each of them would die. The oldest looked about 13, so thin that even an oversized coat couldn't hide the truth. His body was already running on nothing. The youngest was being carried, not crying. And that was the most terrifying part. Because when a child is too weak to cry, it means they're already very close to the end. They walked a road no one should ever take in a season like this. Every step was a decision. Keep going or stop. And stopping meant death. Keep moving, the oldest boy whispered. Not a command. Just a fragile hope he wasn't even sure he believed in anymore. A child behind him stumbled and fell. No one shouted. No one panicked. Only a heavy, terrifying silence. Like they were all asking the same question. This time, would anyone get back up? A girl named Sarah turned back. She knelt down and lifted the child. Said nothing. No blame. She simply refused to leave anyone behind. Do you think, in moments like that, people choose to survive for themselves or for someone else? The wind kept blowing, time kept moving, and the cold kept taking, little by little, everything that remained. Until, in the distance, something appeared. A house. Not large, not warm, but it stood there like a promise no one dared to believe. The boy stopped, looked, then turned back to the others. No one spoke, because they all understood this could be salvation, or the place where they all die together. Sarah tightened her grip on the child in her arms. Her eyes didn't light up with hope. They just became more resolute. Move, she said softly. And they moved. On the other side of that door was a man who had forgotten how to hope a long time ago. Harlan Boone. People called him the giant cowboy. Not because he wanted them to, but because he never bothered correcting them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hands built for hard labor, though there was no one left who needed that strength anymore. The place he lived in wasn't a home. It was shelter, just enough for him to exist. Nothing more, nothing less. The fire in the stove burned low, not because he lacked wood, but because he didn't need much warmth. A man who lives alone doesn't need to be warm, just not dead. On the old wooden table sat something he had never thrown away. A necklace. The silver pendant had long since tarnished. No longer bright, no longer beautiful. But he kept it. Not because he cherished it, but because he could never forget why it existed. He picked it up, looked at it. No expression. Like a man staring at something that used to be a part of him, but was now only a memory. Have you ever held on to something? Not because you wanted to remember, but because you simply couldn't forget outside. The wind hissed through the cracks in the wood. The house creaked with small, familiar sounds. Sounds that only someone who has lived long enough in solitude can understand. They're not danger. Just the presence of the world outside. Harlan stood, slowly. His joints gave a quiet protest as he moved. He stepped out onto the porch, looked out at the endless white. Nothing. No one. And he liked it that way. Because when there's no one, he turned back, about to close the door. Then he stopped. A sound. Very faint. Not the wind. Not the wood. Not an animal. He stood still, listening. Again. A voice. Please. So soft it almost didn't exist. But he heard it. And that was enough. He opened the door again, stepped outside. The cold cut into his skin like knives. But he didn't react. His eyes scanned the white expanse ahead. At first, nothing. Then, movement. Low shapes. Huddled together. Unclear. Uncertain. Until he stepped closer. And he saw them. 12 children. Not something he expected. Not something he wanted to see. But something he had tried to forget. A long time ago. They stood there. Not moving forward. Not running away. Just standing. As if waiting for judgment. The oldest boy stepped forward. His legs trembling. But he stood. "Mr." He swallowed. His lips cracked. "Please." That was all. No story. No explanation. No tears. Just the truth. Harlan looked at them. 1, 2, 3, 12. He counted. Not because he needed to, but because he couldn't help it. 12 children. In the middle of winter. He knew what that meant. No miracles. No easy answers. Just one simple truth. If he let them in, he might die with them. If he turned away, they would definitely die. What would you do if a single decision could cost you your life, but save someone else? The wind grew stronger. A child in the back collapsed. No one ran to them. No one shouted. Only Sarah. She stepped forward, helped the child up, as if it was the only thing she could do. Her eyes met Harlan's. No begging. No fear. Just acceptance. As if she was already prepared for any outcome. Even death. Harlan looked at her. For a long time. Then he turned away. 1 step. 2 steps. He walked toward the house. Said nothing. Gave no explanation. Only when he opened the door did he stop. "Follow me." His voice was low. Not warm. Not cold. Just a decision. And in that moment, 12 children were given one more day to live. The door shut behind them. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to cut them off from the outside world. The wind still howled out there, but inside the house, there was only a fragile warmth and 13 strangers. The children didn't step in right away. They stayed close together, near the door, as if ready to run if they had to. No one spoke. No one asked anything, because when you've passed through too many places and been turned away too many times, you learn one thing: never trust shelter too soon. Harlan didn't turn to look at them. He walked straight to the fireplace, bent down, added wood. The flame, once just enough to survive, began to grow. Light spread. A little warmer, a little more alive. He hung up his coat. Only then did he speak. His voice rough and short. Closed the door. The oldest boy turned quickly, pulling the wooden door shut tight. The wind was cut off. The house exhaled. The children still didn't move. No one dared to act on their own. Have you ever noticed? Sometimes what scares people the most isn't the cold outside, but not knowing whether they're allowed to stay. Harlan grabbed a large pot and set it on the stove. He didn't look at them, didn't ask anything else. He opened his food sack. Dried beans, a bit of salted meat, a few wilted carrots. Not much. Not even enough. He paused for a second, very briefly, then continued. Poured everything into the pot. Held nothing back. Didn't calculate. Just made a decision. The water began to boil. The scent of soup slowly filled the air. For the first time, the children reacted. One swallowed. Another placed a hand over their stomach. But no one stepped forward. Sarah remained at the back, holding the baby. Her eyes never left the pot. But it wasn't hunger. She was counting to see if there would be enough for everyone. Have you ever stood in front of a meal, and the first thing you thought wasn't how hungry am I, but is there enough for others? Harlan pulled out old metal bowls. None of them matched. He placed them on the table, one by one. 1, 2, 3, 12. He stopped, looked at the bowls. For the briefest moment, something passed through his eyes. A memory. Another room. Another table. More voices. More laughter. Then it was gone. He ladled out the soup, evenly divided. Not much, but enough to keep going. He handed the first bowl to the oldest boy. Eat slow, he said. It's not going anywhere. The boy took it, both hands trembling. But he didn't eat right away. He turned, looked at the others, waited. Only when everyone had a bowl in their hands did he begin, and then the room filled with the sound of survival. Spoons against metal, quick swallowing, breathing, growing lighter. Little by little, one child began to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears falling as they ate. Sarah sat down last. She placed the baby on her lap, scooped small spoonfuls, blew gently, fed the child first. Only then did she eat her own portion. Harlan leaned against the wall. He didn't sit, didn't eat, just watched. What do you see in that moment? 12 children, eating as if every spoonful was a chance to live, and one man, standing there as if he didn't belong to that moment. And yet, he stayed. Is that kindness? Or something deeper? The fire burned stronger. The room grew warmer. But something else changed even more: the air. It was no longer as heavy as before. No longer as unfamiliar as when the door first closed. Something was forming. Slowly. Very slowly. But real. When they finished eating, no one left. No one asked, "When do we have to go?" No one dared. Harlan gathered the bowls, washed them, set them aside. Then he pulled out a stack of old blankets, tossed them onto the floor. Sleep. Just one word. The children looked at each other, unsure, unbelieving. Sarah was the first to move. She spread a blanket, laid the baby down, then lay beside them. The others followed, one by one. They lay close together, not because there wasn't space, but because they were used to it, used to keeping warm with each other's bodies. Have you noticed? These children haven't just learned how to survive, they've learned how to survive without anyone. And that is the most heartbreaking part. Harlan dimmed the lights, leaving only the fire. He sat in a wooden chair nearby, didn't lie down, didn't rest, just sat. Watched. One child turned in their sleep. Another murmured something unclear. The smallest one breathed more evenly. Still alive. The night passed slowly, very slowly, as if even time itself had been frozen by the cold. Harlan didn't sleep. He wasn't used to sleeping with others in the house. Or maybe he didn't dare. His gaze lingered on Sarah. She wasn't fully asleep, her eyes slightly open. Alert, always ready to wake, always ready to protect. Just like him, a silence stretched between them. No words, no names, but real. Do you believe that sometimes family doesn't begin with blood, but with surviving a night like this together? The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind still blew. Winter wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. And Harlan Boone understood one thing better than anyone. Feeding them one meal didn't mean they were saved. He looked at the empty pot. Then, at the 12 sleeping children. A question surfaced. Not for the first time, but this time, he couldn't ignore it. "How long?" he whispered. "Can I keep them alive?" The fire reflected in his eyes. And for the first time in many years, there was something there besides emptiness. Not hope. Not yet. But something beginning. The second night came faster than they expected. There was no clear boundary between day and night in that winter. The light simply faded, and the cold grew deeper. The fire in the stove burned low, not because Harlan lacked wood, but because he had started calculating, not for today, for the days ahead. Have you ever noticed? The moment you begin to ration is the moment you realize things aren't going to be easy. The children slept in a cluster on the floor. Their breathing formed a strange rhythm, uneven, unsettled, but still alive. Harlan remained where he had been the night before, boots still on, never lying down. His eyes never left the room, as if the moment he blinked, something would disappear. And then it happened. A sound, small, but wrong. A cough, dry, short, then another. Harlan was on his feet instantly. No thought, no hesitation, just instinct. Sarah was already awake. She sat up sharply, pulling the baby into her arms. The baby was trembling, but not from the cold. Its breathing was shallow, fast, uneven. "No," Sarah whispered. Her voice broke. "No, no, no." She shook her head, as if denial alone could stop it from happening. "Please," she looked at Harlan. For the first time, her eyes lost control. "Please save him." It was no longer a soft voice. It was a real plea, the kind that comes from someone who has been strong for far too long. Harlan dropped to his knees. They hit the floor with a heavy sound. He placed his hand on the baby's forehead. Hot. Too hot. He said nothing, just gave a slight nod, as if he understood, as if he had seen this too many times. Have you ever felt that? When you already know what's coming, and you're afraid this time, you won't be able to save them either. Harlan stood, faster than his age should allow. He grabbed a wooden box from the shelf, opened it. Inside, there were no miracles, just a few dried herbs, some powder, things that guaranteed nothing, but were all he had. He boiled water. Quick, careful, precise, like a habit carved deep into his body. Sarah sat there, never taking her eyes off the baby. She whispered over and over, "It's okay, it's okay." But her voice didn't believe itself. Harlan returned, holding the medicine. He sat across from her. "Hold him," he said. She obeyed instantly. No questions, no doubt. He lifted the baby's head, gently, carefully, as if it might break at any moment. "Breathe," he said, his voice low, slow, not for Sarah, not for the other children, only for the baby. "Listen to me. Breathe." He let drops of medicine fall into its mouth, pressed against its chest. Steady rhythm, patient, as if he were pulling it, back from somewhere far away. Sarah watched him, without blinking. In the firelight, she saw something she hadn't seen in the daylight. His hands were shaking, very slightly, but real, not from the cold, from memory. Do you realize? Sometimes the greatest fear isn't losing someone, but having to go through it all over again. Harlan didn't look at her, but he knew she was watching, knew she could see, and he didn't stop her, because some truths can't be hidden. The baby's breathing began to slow, not steady yet, but no longer frantic. Zara inhaled for the first time, as if she had been holding her breath the entire time. She started. Harlan raised his hand. Ass signal. Silence. Not yet. He didn't say much, but every word carried weight and truth. He continued, holding the rhythm, holding the breath, holding the life. Time passed. No one in the room went back to sleep. The other children were awake now. They didn't come closer. They only watched, in silence, as if they understood this was a line not everyone makes it across. The fire burned stronger. Sweat formed on Harlan's forehead. He didn't wipe it, didn't stop, didn't slow down. What do you think keeps a person standing in moments like this? Skill, experience, or a promise they once failed to keep? Finally, the baby took a deep breath. Once, then another, slower, more even. Its body no longer shook violently. Sarah broke, not loudly, not dramatically, just tears falling. Endless, uncontrolled. Harlan let go, slowly, as if he wasn't sure whether he had truly succeeded. He leaned back, against the wall, exhaled, heavy, so heavy. His eyes didn't look at anyone, only at the floor. But in that moment, he wasn't in this house anymore. He was somewhere else. Another room, another child, another night, where he hadn't been in time. Sarah looked at him. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to, because she understood this wasn't the first time he had done this. And maybe it hadn't always ended this way. She gently placed her hand over his, very lightly, like a question, like an acknowledgement. Harlan didn't pull away, but he didn't look at her either. He just said, "Keep him warm." His voice returned to normal, dry, short, as if nothing had happened. But they both knew everything had changed. Outside, the wind still howled. Winter was still there, unforgiving, unyielding. But inside that house, something had just happened. Not a miracle, not a victory, just a life that hadn't been taken, and a man who faced his own pain again and didn't turn away. The next morning came slowly. The light didn't flood the house. It only slipped through the cracks in the wood, faint, as if even the sun hesitated to return to this place. But something was different. The air in the room had changed, not as heavy as the first day, not as distant as when the door first opened. It was still cold, still difficult, but something felt warmer, something that didn't come from the fire. Harlan was the first to wake. As always, he sat up slowly, his joints cracking softly, the familiar sound of a body worn down by too many years of labor. He looked around. 12 children, still there, still breathing, still alive. A simple truth, but not a small one. Have you ever realized? Sometimes the greatest victory is simply not losing anyone overnight. His gaze settled in the corner of the room. Sarah. She was still awake, leaning against the wall. The baby rested in her arms, breathing more evenly now. She hadn't fully slept, just didn't dare to sleep deeply. Like him, a habit born from loss. They looked at each other, said nothing. But this time, they weren't strangers anymore. Just two people who understood each other a little more. Harlan stood, rekindled the fire, added more wood. The flames rose stronger than the night before. He didn't hold back this time, not because he had more, but because he had accepted something. They were staying, at least for one more day, and if that was the case, then that day he needed to be warm. The children began to wake, quietly, no rush, just small movements. One sat up, another rubbed their eyes, another checked if they were still alive, and then one of them smiled. Small, very small, but enough to change the entire room. Do you remember the last time you heard laughter? After a long silence. It isn't loud, but it changes everything. Harlan didn't turn, but he heard it, and he didn't stop it. That alone was a change. Breakfast was nothing special. Less than the night before. Thinner, but enough. And this time there were voices. Very quiet, very careful, as if the children were testing whether they were allowed to exist in this house just a little more. "Mister," the oldest boy spoke, hesitant. "Can we help?" Harlan paused. didn't turn right away. That question he hadn't heard in a long time. Help. Not asking. Not receiving. But giving. He turned, looked at the boy, then at the others. All of them were waiting. Not for food, but to be acknowledged. Do you see it? People don't just need to survive. They need to feel like they matter. Harlan nodded. Just slightly. But enough. Chop wood, he said. But don't go far. The boy nodded hard, as if he'd just been given something important. The others stood too. No one complained. No one feared the cold. Because when you're trusted, you'll do more than you think you can. Sarah watched. Silent. But her eyes softened. Not because everything was okay, but because something was forming. A system. A connection. Something close to a family. She stood, placed the baby near the fire, then walked over to Harlan. You don't have to do this alone, she said, her voice calm, but steady. Harlan looked at her. 1 second. 2. He wasn't used to someone standing beside him, wasn't used to sharing the weight. But he didn't refuse. He handed her a small knife. Cut these, he said. That was all. No thanks. No explanation. But it was acceptance. Sarah took it. No hesitation. No questions. She began. Slow, but careful. And in that moment, something very small happened. Harlan was no longer the only one holding everything together. The burden was shared. Do you believe? That connection doesn't begin with words, but with moments like this outside. The snow kept falling. Endless. Unchanging. But inside the house there was rhythm. Movement. Meaning? Afternoon came. The light faded. The children returned inside. Hands frozen. But their faces no longer carried the same despair as before. One of them brought in a bundle of wood. Not much. But they set it down, with pride. Harlan looked, said nothing, but he added the wood to the fire, as if saying, I see it. And sometimes being seen is enough. Night fell again, but it wasn't the same as before. The heavy fear was gone. The uncertainty of what happens tomorrow had softened. It was simply another day had passed. And they were still here. Harlan sat down. As usual, but no longer as distant. A child walked over, hesitant, then sat near him, not touching, just closer. Harlan said nothing, didn't push them away, just allowed it. Sarah saw. She smiled, very faintly. Almost no one would notice, but it was real. Do you think this is how family begins? Not with blood, not with promises, but with staying, through each day, through each night, even when you don't know what tomorrow brings. The fire burned, steadier now, warmer, and in the corner of the room a pendant slipped slightly from Sarah's pocket. The dull silver caught the firelight. For the first time, it wasn't just a memory. It became something waiting to be revealed. The third day passed more quietly than they expected, and that was what made it terrifying. Because in this land, quiet doesn't mean safe. It means something is coming. Harlan stood on the porch early that morning. His breath drifted into the air in pale clouds. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking out, toward the horizon, where there was nothing but snow, and whatever lay beneath it. Have you ever felt that something was wrong? Even when everything looked normal, he stepped down from the wooden porch, walked slowly. Each step pressed deep into the snow. He didn't go far, just enough to check. A habit, one that had kept him alive through more winters than he cared to remember. He looked down. Old tracks, the children's, his own, but no new ones. No animals, no deer, no rabbits, nothing. He stopped, looked longer. Too long. A land without tracks is not a safe land. It's a land that's been drained of life. Harlan turned back. Not rushed, but faster than usual. Inside, the children were working. No one told them to. No one reminded them. But they worked. One tended the fire. One wiped the floor. Another tried to patch a torn coat. Sarah sat near the window. Faint light fell across her face. She was sewing a scarf. Her hands didn't shake, didn't rush, didn't slow, as if she had been doing this her whole life. Harlan stood at the doorway, watching, saying nothing. Sarah felt it. She looked up. Their eyes met. "There's nothing out there," he said, his voice low, short. Sarah understood immediately. Nothing was not good news. She nodded. Didn't ask more. Didn't need to. "Have you noticed? Some conversations only need one sentence. That meal was smaller than the one before." No one said it out loud, but everyone saw. One child looked into their bowl, then at Harlan. Didn't ask. Didn't complain. Just ate more slowly, trying to stretch it, trying to hold on to the feeling a little longer. Have you ever slowed down your eating, not to enjoy it, but because you knew there would be nothing after Harlan stood there, watching, unable to do anything else? And for the first time, he didn't look at the fire. He looked at the pot, empty, almost completely. A silence settled in. No one broke it. Until, "Can we go out and look?" the oldest boy asked. His voice wasn't afraid, just hopeful. Harlan looked at him, then shook his head. "Not yet." One word, but heavy. Because not yet doesn't mean never. It means not safe. Afternoon came quickly. The light faded before they realized it. The wind began to pick up. Not loud, but different. It carried a strange sound, as if something was moving far away. Harlan stood, walked to the door, opened it. The wind pushed in, colder, sharper. He inhaled deeply, closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. His expression changed. Can you tell when a man who's survived too many winters starts to worry? Not by what he says, but by the way he listens. He closed the door, turned back inside. "We're going to need more wood," he said, "and water." No one asked why. No one argued. The children stood up, immediately, like a unit, no longer scattered individuals, but a system. Sarah stepped closer. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Soft, but direct. Harlan looked at her. "Longer than Shewell. The wind changed direction," he said, "and there are no animal tracks." Sarah wasn't a hunter, hadn't lived long in this land, but she understood. Enough to know that wasn't good. "How long?" she asked. A question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Harlan didn't respond right away. He looked at the fire, then at the children, then back at her. Not long. No one said anything else. But in that moment, everything changed. It was no longer "can we survive?" It became, "how much time do we have?" Night fell. Fast. Heavy. The fire burned higher. Not for warmth, but to prepare. A child walked up to Sarah. "Are we going to be okay?" they asked. Sarah looked at them, then at Harlan, then back again. She smiled. Faint. "We'll try." Not a promise. But the truth? What matters more? "Do you think a certain promise? Or someone who refuses to give up?" Harlan sat down, like every night. But this time, his hands were tighter. His gaze no longer rested on the room. It reached farther, through the walls, through the darkness, toward the storm that was coming. And in the corner, the pendant caught the firelight again. This time, it wasn't just a memory. It became a sign. Something tied to the past, slowly making its way into the present. That night, the wind didn't stop. It was no longer a distant sound. It became something present, pressing against the walls, slipping through the cracks. whistling as if it were searching for a way inside. The house groaned softly, not collapsing, but enduring. Have you ever heard a house trying to hold itself together, not with your eyes, but through sound, through feeling, through that quiet knowing that if things get just a little worse, it won't hold? Harlan didn't sleep. No one in that house slept deeply. The children lay closer together. No one told them to, but they knew. Closer meant warmer. Closer meant safer. At least, it felt that way. The fire burned strong, not out of abundance, but out of necessity. Harlan had stopped conserving, at least for that night. Because there are nights when saving resources is no longer an option. It becomes a risk. He stood, checked the door. Once, twice, 3 times. Not because he didn't trust it, but because he didn't trust the storm. Sarah was still awake, leaning against the wall, eyes open, watching him, not asking, just watching. Get some sleep, Harlan said. His voice wasn't harsh, but it wasn't soft. Sarah shook her head slightly. You're not sleeping either. A simple sentence, but enough. Harlan didn't respond. He turned away, but he didn't deny it. Have you noticed? There are people who don't need many words to understand each other. A loud crash echoed outside. The entire house shuddered. One child jolted awake, breathing fast. Sarah immediately leaned down, wrapped her arms around them. It's okay. It's okay. But her grip was tighter than usual. Harlan opened the door. Just a crack. The wind attacked instantly, cold like knives. He looked outside. Couldn't see anything anymore. Just white. And movement. Fast. Dense. Directionless. He closed the door. Slow. Firm. Then turned back inside. His expression said everything the storm had arrived. And it wasn't the kind that passed overnight. Have you ever been trapped in something you know you can't escape, can't outrun, can only wait for it to end? The next morning, there was no light, just a slightly lighter shade of gray. The door wouldn't open. Snow had piled high, pressed in from the outside, as if the world was trying to seal them in. Harlan pushed. It didn't budge. He didn't try again. Didn't waste the energy. Stay inside, he said. That was all. No explanation. None needed. The children understood. Sarah understood. They had entered a new phase. No longer finding a way to survive, but keeping each other alive. What do you think is harder, finding a way out or enduring when there is no way out? That day was long, very long. Nothing to do but stay warm. Nothing to see but the walls. Nothing to hear but the wind. Time began to warp, slowing, growing heavier. One child started coughing. Not severe, but enough to draw attention. Harlan noticed, said nothing, but he kept count. 1, then 2, then 3. The fever began. Not violently, but spreading. Slow, silent, like the storm. Sarah moved constantly, between the children, checking, touching foreheads, measuring, remembering. She didn't need to be taught. She had learned this before. Have you ever realized the people who have lost the most are often the ones who know best how to hold others together? Harlan stood by the stove, cooking, but this time not to fill them, to sustain them. He added more water, much more, thinning it out. No one said anything. No one complained. But they all understood. This wasn't a meal anymore. This was buying time. Sarah stepped closer, looked into the pot, then at him. How much do we have left? She asked. Harlan didn't answer right away. He looked into the pot, then at her. Not enough, he said. Straight. No hesitation. Sarah nodded, not surprised. She already knew. She just needed to hear it. Do you want to know the truth, even when it changes nothing? Or would you rather hold on to hope, even when you know it isn't real? Afternoon came. No change, just darker. The wind was still there, unfading, unrelenting. A child sat near the door, staring at the wall, as if they could see through it. When will it stop, they asked. No one answered. No one knew. And sometimes the most frightening question is the one without an answer. The second night of the storm, Harlan didn't sit anymore. He moved, checked, fixed, trying to keep everything stable. Sarah watched him. You're going to exhaust yourself, she said. Harlan stopped. For a second. Not now. A simple answer, but heavy, because not now means maybe later. Sarah didn't say anything else, but her eyes changed. She began to do more, act on her own, share the burden, without being told, without being asked. A system had formed. No one said it, but everyone was part of it. Do you believe real families don't need rules, just circumstances? In the corner, the pendant appeared again. This time, it slipped from Sarah's pocket. Softly. No one noticed. Except Harlan. His gaze paused, just for a second. But enough. He didn't speak, didn't ask, just watched. A memory stirred, then faded. For now, outside, the storm still roared. Inside, something else was forming. Not hope, not yet, but endurance. And sometimes endurance is the first step toward hope. The third day of the storm was no different from the second, and that was what made everything start to become dangerous. Not because the wind was stronger, not because the snow was deeper, but because people were beginning to get tired. Have you ever noticed? The human body can endure so much, but the mind breaks first. Inside the house, the air grew heavier, not from lack of oxygen, but from worry. One child coughed, then another. The sound wasn't loud, but it repeated, steady, like a reminder. The real storm was no longer outside. It had come inside. Sarah moved from one child to another. She touched their foreheads, remembered, compared, guessed. No tools, no doctor, only experience from past losses. This one's hotter, she said quietly. Harlan nodded. Didn't question, didn't doubt. They worked like a team. No discussion, no assignments, just understanding. Do you believe a real connection doesn't need to be spoken? One child's fever spiked, not the youngest, a child around 8. They trembled, uncontrollably, eyes unfocused. Keep them closer to the fire, Harlan said. Sarah moved immediately, wrapped the child in 2 blankets, then a third. But the cold wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the body. And that was harder to fight. Have you ever felt that some things can't be fought with strength, only with time and hope? Harlan stood by the stove, but this time he wasn't cooking. He was deciding. A small pouch of herbs. Not much. He knew using it now might save one child, but afterward, there would be nothing left for the others. He closed his eyes. 1 second, 2, then opened them. Use it, he said. No explanation, no hesitation. Sarah didn't ask. She took it, began preparing it, as if it were obvious. But they both knew it was a decision with a cost. What would you do if you couldn't save everyone and had to choose? No one said it out loud, but that question was in the air, in their eyes, in the silence between them. The afternoon grew heavier. No one spoke anymore. No one laughed. Only the wind, the coughing, and the fire. A child approached Harlan, hesitant. "Mister," they said, softly, "are we going to die?" The question wasn't loud, but it stopped everything. Harlan looked at them, didn't avoid it, didn't turn away. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He simply said, "Not yet." One word, but different. Not a promise, not comfort, just truth. We're not dead yet, and sometimes that alone is enough to keep going. The child nodded, turned away, sat back down, didn't ask again, didn't cry, just accepted it. Sarah looked at Harlan. Her eyes were no longer just grateful. They held respect. Do you think true respect comes from saying the right thing or from not lying? Night fell. Again. No difference. Just more tired. Heavier. Slower. Harlan sat down. But this time he wasn't looking at the fire. He was looking at Sarah. She sat among the children, one arm holding the baby, the other resting on another child's forehead. No rest. No pause. No complaints. She wasn't the strongest person in the room, but she was the one who didn't stop. Harlan stood, walked over, sat beside her, didn't speak, just stayed. A moment. Silent, but full. Have you ever lost someone? Sarah asked, not looking at him, just asking. As if she had carried that question for a long time, Harlan didn't answer right away. His gaze was no longer in the room. Yes, he said. One word, but enough to tell an entire story. Sarah nodded. Didn't ask more. Didn't need to. Because she understood. In her own way. Have you noticed? People who have lost someone don't need the details to understand each other. The fire crackled softly. A small sound. The pendant slipped free again. This time it fell between them. Harlan saw it. Clearly. Impossible to ignore. He bent down. Picked it up. Dual silver. Scorched at one edge. His hand tightened. A memory returned. Stronger. Closer. Sarah watched. She recognized it immediately. And in that moment everything stopped. No wind. No coughing. No room. Only the past and the present colliding. You know it, she said. Not a question. Harlan didn't answer. But his grip tightened. Have you ever felt something from your past suddenly return, and you know this time you can't avoid it? The firelight reflected off the pendant. For the first time, it wasn't just an object. It was a promise, a secret, something waiting to be revealed. And when it is everything, will change. The pendant rested in Harlan's hand. Small, worn, scorched at one edge, but enough to pull an entire past back into the present. The firelight flickered across its tarnished silver surface. The glow trembled, like memory, unclear, but impossible to erase. The room fell silent. No one spoke. No one moved. As if everyone could feel it, something had just changed. Sarah didn't reach for the necklace. She didn't try to explain. She just looked straight ahead, unflinching. Have you ever stood in front of a truth that you knew would break everything and still refused to look away? Harlan sat there, his grip still tight, his eyes no longer on Sarah, but through her, toward somewhere else. Another time, another night when fire wasn't meant to warm, but to destroy. Screams, smoke, the smell of burning wood, and his family. He stood abruptly, said nothing, looked at no one. He stepped away, walked to the table, set the pendant down, not gently. A small clack echoed, but it carried weight, a heavy one. Sarah stood, slowly. She didn't step closer, just stood there, waiting. You know it, she said again. This time her voice was lower, not from fear, but from acceptance. Harlan turned his back, his shoulders tense. He didn't answer. Not yet. Have you noticed? There are questions. People don't answer, not because they don't want to, but because they can't. Finally, he spoke. "Where did you get that?" His voice wasn't loud, but sharp. The steadiness from before was gone. The distance. 2. What remained was a cut. Sarah inhaled softly. "The camp up north," she said. "The one that burned." The children didn't understand, but Harlan did. Too well. He turned back, slowly. His eyes were no longer those of a man helping, but of someone remembering. "You were there?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "My father," she stopped. 1 second. 2. Not to think, but to gather the strength to say it. He caused the fire. The room froze, not from the cold, but from the truth. What do you think is harder, enduring the cold, or speaking a truth that might make someone hate you forever? Sarah continued. Not fast, not slow, just not stopping. He was drunk, she said. An oil lamp fell. The fire spread, fast. No one had time. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Because what she didn't say was heavier. Harlan didn't blink, didn't react, but his hand was trembling. Very slightly. Almost no one could see. Except, "Sarah, and you ran," he said. Not a question. A conclusion. Sarah shook her head. No. One word. But different. I went back. I pulled some of the children out. The others. She didn't continue. Didn't need to. Because they both understood what the others meant. A long silence followed. No one breathed too loudly. No one moved. The fire crackled softly, as if it, too, was listening. Have you ever felt the whole world stop just to see what you'll do next? Harlan took a step toward her. Slow, heavy, each step dragging the past with it. My family, he began, his voice low, very low, was there. Not an accusation, not a shout, just the truth. And it was enough. Sarah closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. Yes, she said. No denial, no escape, just acceptance. Can you forgive someone when they didn't directly hurt you but were part of what did? No one spoke again. But the air had completely changed. This was no longer a house of survival. It had become a place of confrontation. A small child tugged at Sarah's sleeve. Sis, they whispered. They didn't understand, but they felt it. Sarah knelt down, placed a hand on their head. A reflex. A promise she was still here, no matter what happened. Harlan watched. His gaze shifted, subtly, but real. He no longer saw only the past. He saw the present. 12 children, and a girl, holding them together. What weighs more, the past that has already happened, or the present that still needs you? Harlan turned away. He didn't say leave. He didn't say stay. He just turned. But he didn't open the door. He didn't drive them out. And sometimes, what you don't do matters just as much as what you do. Sarah watched him. She understood. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it wasn't rejection either. It was something in between. A place, very hard to stand. Outside. The storm still howled, but inside another storm had begun. And this time, it wasn't something they could simply wait out. After the truth was spoken, the house was no longer the same. There was no arguing, no shouting, but the silence was what made everything suffocating. Have you ever been in a room where no one says anything, and yet you can feel everything falling apart? Harlan no longer looked at Sarah. Not directly. He moved as usual, tended the fire, checked the door, divided the food. But something had changed. He was no longer with them. He was just existing in the same space. The children felt it. They didn't understand what had happened, but they understood. Something wasn't right. One of them whispered, "Are we going to have to leave?" No one answered. No one dared to. Sarah heard it. She didn't turn. She just tightened her grip, as if letting go would make everything collapse. What do you think is more frightening for a child? The cold outside, or being abandoned again? That morning, no one ate much. Not because they weren't hungry, but because the air made everything hard to swallow. Harlan set his bowl down, looked at the pot, almost empty, then looked up. The children, Sarah, the pendant. 3 things, 3 choices, 3 paths. He knew he couldn't keep them all. Not enough food, not enough time, not enough strength. What would you do when helping someone might cost you your life? He stood, walked toward the door, didn't put on his coat right away, just stood there, as if waiting for a reason to do what he had been thinking about since the night before. Sarah stood. She knew. No one had to say it. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Her voice didn't shake, but it wasn't as steady as before. Harlan didn't turn. "I need to think." A simple sentence, but not an answer. Sarah stepped closer. "You're thinking about sending us away." Not a question. A statement. The children fell silent. No one moved, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Harlan's hands tightened. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it, but that was enough. Can you blame someone when they have to choose between survival and doing what's right? Sarah nodded. Slowly. "All right," she said. One word, but heavy. "I'll go." She turned, looked at the children, but they stay. No one argued. No one cried. Because they all understood this was the only way. Have you noticed? A true adult is someone willing to leave so others can stay. Harlan turned back. Fast. His eyes changed. No. One word. For the first time, he reacted instantly. Sarah stopped. Looked at him. "You can't keep everyone," she said. "You know that." Harlan stepped forward. One step. Then another. "And I can't choose," he said, his voice low, but firm. A silence followed. Long. The fire crackled. The wind slammed against the walls. But no one heard it. Because right now, the real storm was between them. What do you think is harder, choosing who gets to live, or living with that choice? A small child stood up. They walked between the two of them. Slowly. Afraid, but still moving. "Don't," they said. Softly. "Don't fight." That sentence simple, but it broke everything. Harlan looked down at them. Sarah did too. In that moment there was no past. No blame. Only a child, afraid of being left behind. Do you think sometimes the weakest ones are the ones who hold everything together? Harlan exhaled. Heavy. His shoulders lowered slightly. Not much, but enough to see he was struggling. He turned away. Again. But this time not to avoid. To think. Sarah didn't say anything more. She went back. Sat down. Held the baby. Like before. But different. No certainty. No calm. Only waiting. Outside the storm hadn't stopped. Inside a decision was forming. Slow. Painful. But unavoidable. And when it's made, nothing will be the same. That night, no one slept. Not because of the wind. Not because of the cold. But because something was waiting to be decided. The fire burned high. But no one felt warmer. Harlan sat alone. Away from the children. Away from Sarah. Away from everyone. The firelight carved across his face, etching the lines of a man who had lived too long with memory. Have you ever had to make a decision where you knew no matter what you chose, you would lose a part of yourself? He looked at his hands. Large, rough, calloused. Hands that had once built, once protected, and once failed to save. A flash of memory. A burning house. A woman. A child. His fists clenched, so tight his knuckles turned white. Not this time, he whispered. So quiet, but enough. Enough for himself to hear. Sarah sat across the room. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. Her eyes followed him. Not pushing, not asking, just waiting. Do you believe? There are moments when silence is the only way to respect someone fighting themselves. Finally, Harlan stood. Slow, but steady. He stepped into the center of the room. No need to call. No need to signal. Everyone was already looking at him. The children, Sarah, the fire, the whole house, as if everything knew this was the moment. He looked around. Slowly. Every face, every pair of eyes, every life. No one is going anywhere, he said. Not loud, but clear. The entire room exhaled. No cheers, no smiles. Just a weight, lifting. Have you ever felt lighter, just because you knew you weren't being left behind? Sarah closed her eyes. For a second, then opened them. No tears. No thank you. Just a small nod. Like an acknowledgement she had been right to trust him. But Harlan wasn't finished. He looked at the pot. Then, the door. Then spoke again. But we won't survive if we stay here. No one argued. No one asked. Because everyone knew it was true. Tomorrow, he said. I go out. A child burst out no. Out there, Harlan raised a hand. Silence. It has to be done. Short. Emotionless. But unchangeable. Sarah stood. You can't go alone. Harlan looked at her. I can. No, she said. One word. But strong. If you fall out there, we all die. Silence. That sentence wasn't resistance. It was truth. Have you noticed? Sometimes telling the truth is the only way to stop someone. Harlan didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, longer than usual, then said, Then you come with me. Not an invitation. Not a question. A decision. Sarah nodded. No hesitation. No fear. Because she understood this wasn't about her anymore. Or him. It was about all of them. That night no one slept deeply. But something had changed. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was preparing. The next morning, the storm hadn't stopped, but it had weakened. Just a little. Enough to try. Harlan put on his coat. Thick, worn, but solid. He tied it tight. Sarah did the same. No one spoke. No need. A child grabbed Sarah's hand. Come back. Their voice small. Very small. Sarah knelt. Placed a hand on their head. Yeah, she said. Not a promise. Just hope. What do you think drives a person to step outside when they know they might not come back? Duty, love, or no other choice? The door opened. The wind rushed in. Strong, cold, merciless. Harlan stepped out first. Didn't look back. Sarah followed. The door shut. And in that moment the house became terrifyingly quiet. Outside there was nothing. No direction. No trace. Only white. And wind. Harlan walked ahead. Sarah followed. Not too close. Not too far. Because too close they'd slow each other down. Too far they'd lose each other. Have you noticed? Sometimes survival is just keeping the right distance. They walked. Not fast. Not slow. Just forward. Every step, a decision. Keep going or stop. The wind grew stronger. Snow struck their faces. No clear sight. No clear sound. Only instinct. And then Harlan stopped. Suddenly, Sarah nearly collided with him. What? He raised a hand, pointed down. Footprints. Faint. Almost erased. But there. A sin. A chance. A hope. Harlan turned. Looked at Sarah. Didn't speak. But she understood. They followed the tracks. Farther. Harder. More dangerous. But it was the only way. Time passed. No one knew how long. Their bodies grew heavy. Their steps slowed. Breathing. Harder. And then Harlan faltered. This time, not because of tracks, but because of himself. His foot slipped. His body tilted. And he fell. Hard. Heavy. He didn't get up right away. Sarah turned. Harlan. She rushed to him. Dropped to her knees. Pulled at him. Get up. No response. Just breathing. Heavy. So heavy. Have you ever seen someone strong collapse for the first time? It's not loud. But it's terrifying. You can't. Sarah stopped herself. She didn't say you can't die. She didn't lie. She said, we're not done. Harlan opened his eyes. Slowly. Looked at her. Then, into the distance. Then, nodded. Barely. He pushed himself up. Slow. Painful. But he stood. What do you think kept him standing? Strength. Or 12 children waiting for him. They kept moving. Slower now. But not stopping. Because now, going back, was no longer an option. The wind didn't weaken. They had just grown used to it. Harlan and Sarah kept moving. No conversation. None needed. They both understood if they stopped for too long, their bodies wouldn't get back up. Have you ever reached a point where you can't tell anymore if you're moving forward or just trying not to fall? The footprints ahead began to fade, almost gone. But Harlan kept following them, not because he was certain, but because he had no other choice. Sarah began to slow, not because she was weak, but because she was carrying him forward. Harlan didn't say anything, but she knew he was weakening. His breathing grew heavier, his steps less steady. Every time he paused, it became dangerous. We go back, Sarah said. Not loud, but firm. Harlan shook his head. Didn't look at her. Not yet. One word, but heavy. Sarah clenched her hands. You won't make it back, if. Not yet. This time his voice was stronger, not because he had strength left, but because he refused to stop. Have you noticed? There are people who would rather collapse moving forward than turn back. They kept going. The wind shifted. Slightly. Barely. But enough for Harlan to notice. He stopped. Looked to the left. Not following the tracks anymore, but following. Instinct. He stepped off course. Sarah followed. No questions. No doubt. Because now trust was all they had. And then they saw it. A structure. Low. Almost buried in snow. But still there. An old storage shed. Maybe from an abandoned camp. No guarantee of anything inside. No guarantee of safety. But it was something. Have you ever seen an opportunity that you knew might not be enough, but it was all you had? Harlan moved faster. Not much, but noticeably. He pushed the door. It didn't open at first. Frozen shut. He used his shoulder. Pushed. Once. Twice. The door gave. The wind rushed in. Inside, dark. Cold. But there was something. Sacks. A crate. A few old tools. Not much, but not nothing. Sarah stepped in. Opened a sack. Corn. Dry. Hard. But edible. She exhaled. For the first time since leaving the house. We've got something, she said. Not loud, but enough. Harlan didn't smile. Didn't react. He just nodded, as if this wasn't victory. Just more time. Have you noticed, when you've lived in hardship long enough, you stop celebrating. You just keep going. They gathered what they could. Quick. Efficient. Not greedy. Only what they could carry. Because they knew taking too much was also a risk. Sarah tied the sack. Tight. Turned. Let's go. Harlan didn't answer. He was standing, but not moving. Sarah stepped closer. Hey, she stopped. Her expression changed. Harlan was upright, but his eyes weren't focused. His breathing heavy. Too heavy. Are you okay? No response. Just one step. Then he collapsed. No warning. No hesitation. Just done. Sarah rushed forward. No. She dropped to her knees. Grabbed him. Turned him over. His face was hot. Not from the cold. From fever. She pressed her hand to his forehead. Too hot. Too fast. Have you ever seen someone who held everyone else together suddenly, unable to hold themselves? Can you hear me? No response. Just breathing. Broken. Uneven. Sarah looked around. No one. No help. No options. Just her. And him. And a choice. She tightened her grip, closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. Her expression changed. No fear. Only decision. We're not done, she said, repeating his words. But this time, she was saying them to him. What happens when the one who was saved becomes the one who must save? She pulled him. Not easy. Not light. His body was heavy. Very heavy. But she didn't stop. Not even once. Pull. Pause. Breathe. Then, pull again. The wind struck her back. Snow coated her hair. Her hands went numb. Her legs trembled. But she didn't stop. Because if she did, everything would end. Do you believe? Love isn't a feeling, but the act of dragging someone forward when you have nothing left. Harlan didn't wake, but his body was still there, still breathing, and that was enough. In the distance, the house, small, faint, but there. Sarah saw it. And in that moment she didn't see salvation. She saw one last chance. The house was right in front of them, and yet it had never felt so far away. Sarah dragged Harlan through the deep snow. Every step was a battle, not against the wind, not against the cold, but against her own body. Have you ever reached a limit where you had nothing left and still kept going? Because stopping wasn't an option. The door came into view. Familiar wood, familiar cracks. A place that had once been just shelter now became everything. Sarah shoved the door open with her shoulder. It gave way. The wind rushed in. The children inside startled. One of them shouted Sarah. They ran toward her, then stopped. When they saw Harlan, still, heavy, cold, and silent. No one cried. No one screamed. Just a fear that was real. Have you noticed? Children understand the important things, even when no one explains them. Sarah didn't speak. There was no time. Help me, she said. Lows. Her voice didn't shake. Didn't break. Just clear. Immediately they moved. No chaos. No confusion. As if they had learned this. Together. One by one. Lifting. Pulling. Supporting. They brought Harlan close to the fire. Laid him down. As gently as they could. But it was never gentle enough. One child rushed to build up the fire. Another grabbed blankets. Another brought water. No one asked what to do. No one stood still. Because they already knew. Do you believe? Family isn't made when things are easy, but when things are hardest. Sarah knelt beside Harlan. She pressed her hand to his forehead. Hot. Too hot. Worse than before. She looked around. Where's the medicine? A child pointed. She stood, grabbed the box, opened it. Little. So little. She paused. 1 second. 2. Not because she didn't know what to do, but because she understood. This might be the last of it. Would you use the last thing you have to save one person, knowing there may be nothing left for the others? She didn't hesitate again. She began. Boiling water. Preparing the herbs. Holding him steady. Repeating everything he had done. For others, now, for him. Breathe, she whispered, her voice low. Steady. You don't get to leave. Not a command. Not a plea. Just truth. Because if he left, everything would go with him. The children stood around them, not crowding, not asking, just watching, learning, remembering. A small child stepped closer. Will he be okay? No one answered right away. Sarah didn't say yes. She said, we'll do everything we can. Do you hear the difference? Not a promise, but commitment. Time passed. Slow, heavy. The fire burned. No one let it die. No one forgot. One child fell asleep. Another took their place. No one told them to, but they all knew. They were holding someone, the one who had held them. Have you noticed? Real love comes back around. The first night Harlan didn't wake. The second, he was the same. His breathing weak, uneven, but there, still there. Sarah didn't sleep, didn't leave, didn't stop. She sat there, like he once had, in the same place, with the same purpose. Hold on. Just hold on. What do you think kept her going? Duty? Or something that had become more? The third night, something shifted. Not obvious, not strong, but real. His breathing deepened, slowed, more steady. Sarah placed her hand on his forehead. Still warm, but not like before. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. No tears. Not yet, because it wasn't over. Have you ever learned not to celebrate too soon? That morning, real light returned. Not strong, but enough. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The wind had weakened, not gone, but softer. A child looked toward the window. It's morning. Their voice was different, as if, for the first time, they believed in tomorrow. Sarah didn't move, didn't look outside. She only looked at Harlan. And then he moved, very slightly, almost invisible. But there, Sarah stood immediately. Harlan, no response at first, but a second later his eyes opened. Slow, unfocused, then searching, not for a path, but for someone. Sarah. He found her. 1 second. 2. Then he exhaled. Long. As if he had come back. Do you believe? There are people who return not because they're strong, but because someone is waiting. Harlan. Sarah said. Her voice broke for the first time. You came back. He didn't speak right away. His voice weak. Very weak. Not done, she smiled. Through tears. Yeah, we're not done. The children gathered closer. Not loud. Not rushed. Just there. Close. One placed a hand on his. Another pulled the blanket tighter. No one spoke. No need. Because they all understood this was no longer just a group of people. This was a family. Have you realized? Family isn't where you're born. It's where you're held on to. In the corner, the pendant rested on the table. Light touched it. This time it was no longer the past. No longer guilt. It had become part of this story. Part of them. Winter didn't end after that. It never does. It doesn't retreat like a storm. It just slows down, as if it's deciding whether it has taken enough. The house still stood. The fire still burned. And everyone was still alive. But there was one thing left unresolved. Have you ever felt a storm outside has passed, but another one is still inside you? Harlan sat up after 3 days. Slow, painful. His body wasn't the same. Weaker, slower, but his eyes clearer, sharper, and heavier. He looked around. The children, the fire, the house. Then he saw it. The pendant, still there, on the table, as if it had never left, as if it had been waiting. Have you noticed? Some things never disappear, no matter how many times you try to ignore them. Sarah sat near the window. She wasn't looking at him, but she knew he had seen it. She stood, slowly, walked over. No avoidance. No hesitation. You deserve to know everything, she said, not asking, but deciding. Harlan didn't answer right away. He picked up the pendant. This time, he didn't grip it tight. He just held it, looked at it, as if he was seeing something that had changed. "How long were you there?" he asked. His voice wasn't sharp anymore, but it wasn't soft either. Just direct. Sarah took a breath. "Long enough to know everyone," she said. "Long enough to lose them." A silence followed. Not heavy, but deep. "Do you think pain gets easier with time, or does it just become familiar?" "Your father," Harlan began. Sarah nodded. "He died in the fire." No hesitation. No avoidance. He didn't make it out. Harlan studied her. For a long moment, as if searching for a crack, a lie, an escape. But there was none. Only truth. "Do you believe a person can carry someone else's mistakes for an entire lifetime?" "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. This question wasn't an accusation, just real. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her hands, then back up. "Because I was afraid," she said. Simple, honest. "Not afraid of you, but afraid that if I told you—" She stopped. Didn't need to finish. "Because they both understood I'd lose this place." "Have you ever hidden the truth? Not because you wanted to lie, but because you didn't want to lose the only thing you had left." Harlan said nothing. He looked at her, then at the children. One sleeping, one quietly laughing, one trying to fix a worn-out shoe. Small things, but real. He looked back at the pendant. For the first time, it didn't pull him into the past. It stood in the present, between two choices, between two paths. What do you think is harder, forgiving someone else, or letting go of your own past? "How many did you save?" he asked. Sarah blinked. Not the question she expected. "7," she said. "The others?" She didn't continue. Harlan nodded. Slightly. "You went back," he said. Not a question. Sarah nodded. "Yes." Again, no hiding. No turning away. Just standing there. "Have you noticed? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's staying. When you could run. A child ran past. Tripped. Fell. Then got back up on their own. No one shouted. No one rushed in. They just stood up and kept going." Harlan watched, and his expression shifted. Subtle, but real. He stood, slowly, walked towards Sarah. The space between them, no longer distant, but not yet close. "You stay," he said. 3 words, heavier than anything he had said before. Sarah didn't react immediately, as if she needed to hear it again. "Are you sure?" she asked. For the first time, she wasn't certain. Harlan looked at her. Direct. "No." 1 word, but honest. "But I know one thing." He paused, looked at the children, then back at her. "If you leave, they won't be like this. Not praise, not comfort, just truth." Sarah closed her eyes. For a second, then opened them. No tears fell, but they were there. "Thank you," she said. Soft. That was enough. "Do you believe? Sometimes forgiveness isn't about forgetting, but choosing to keep going." Harlan placed the pendant back on the table, but this time it wasn't the same. It wasn't heavy anymore. It had become part of them. Not perfect, not clean, but real. Outside, the wind had softened. The snow had stopped falling. The light, clearer. Not an ending, but a sign. Inside, something more important had happened. No one left. No one was turned away. No one was abandoned. And sometimes that's all a family needs. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It never does. It doesn't appear like a miracle. There's no moment when the snow disappears overnight. It comes slowly, very slowly, As if this land needs time to believe that it's truly over. Have you ever noticed, after the hardest times, trust doesn't return immediately. It has to be rebuilt. The days that followed felt different. Not easier, but different. The snow began to soften. No longer hard like stone. No longer cutting into skin. The light, a little warmer. Just a little, but enough to feel. The door of the house opened again. For the first time in days, not to escape, but to step outside. The children stood on the porch. No one rushed. No one ran. They simply looked at a world that had once tried to kill them, now beginning to change. One stepped forward. Slowly, their foot touched the snow. They didn't fall. They turned back, smiled, small, but real. Do you remember the first time you realized you had made it through something? Harlan stood behind them, leaning against a wooden post. He didn't step down right away. He watched, as if he needed to be sure that this was real. Sarah stood beside him, silent, no words. None needed, because there are moments that don't need them. We made it, she said, softly. Not celebration, just confirmation. Harlan didn't answer right away. He looked out, where the snow had begun to melt, revealing the ground beneath. Dark, damp, but alive. Not done, he said, but this time it was different. Not a warning, a plan. Have you noticed? When someone starts thinking about tomorrow, that's when they've survived. The days that followed became work, real work, no longer just survival, but building. They repaired the shed, cut more wood, cleared snow, put things in order. The children didn't just follow anymore. They acted. They suggested. They learned. One figured out how to set traps. Another learned to cook. Another began to write. The first letters. No one formally taught them, but Sarah sat beside them, guiding, correcting, smiling softly. Do you believe the greatest thing you can give someone is not food, but a future? Harlan watched it all. Didn't say much, but he was there. Always. Not distant, not apart, no longer outside of it, but part of it. One day, a wagon passed by. Rare, very rare. The driver stopped, looked at the house, at the children, then at Harlan. You raising a whole town out here, he asked. Not mocking, just surprised. Harlan didn't smile. They raised themselves, he said. The man nodded, looked once more, then drove on. The story began to spread, slowly, but steadily. Not about a man, but about a place where no one was left behind. Have you noticed? Respect doesn't come from what you say, but from what others see. One afternoon, Harlan sat on the porch, sunlight across his face. Warm, real, not like winter. Sarah stepped out, sat beside him, not too close, but close enough. You still think about them? She asked. She didn't need to say who. Harlan nodded. Yes. One word. Short, but deep. Sarah looked out. Me too. Not comparison. Just shared truth. A silence followed. Not heavy, not uncomfortable. Just there. Do you believe healing isn't about forgetting, but being able to remember? Without breaking, Harlan reached for. This time not from Sarah's hand, but from the table. He looked at it for a moment, then held it out to her. Sarah didn't take it right away. She looked at him. You sure? She asked. This time, the question was his. Harlan nodded. Keep it, he said, but not like before. Sarah took it, slowly, gently, as if it no longer carried the same weight. It's not your fault, Harlan said. Not anymore. Not complete forgiveness. Not forgetting. But Moving forward, do you think sometimes a simple sentence can change how someone sees their entire life? Sarah closed her fingers around it. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy, just part of her. A part that had changed. A part that had survived. Inside, the children laughed. Not loud, but real. That sound was no longer rare. It had become normal. And that was the greatest miracle of all. Have you noticed? Happiness isn't something grand, it's when the small things return. The sun began to set. Golden light spread across the land. No longer endless white, but alive. Harlan stood, slow, but steady. He looked out, then turned back. At the house, at the children, at Sarah. He said nothing. He didn't need to, because the answer was already there. In a world that harsh, a single decision can end a life. Or create a family. And this time, a solitary cowboy chose not to be alone anymore. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. Not everyone has the patience to walk a journey like this one without grand miracles. Just ordinary people, trying not to give up. Maybe what lingers isn't the harsh winter, or the hunger and cold, but the quiet choices, the ones no one sees. Yet somehow change everything. A man who chose not to turn away, even when he had every reason to. A girl who chose to stay, even when her past could have shattered it all. And a group of children who chose to trust, even though life had never given them a reason to. We often think hope is something big, but sometimes hope is simply taking one more step. Even when you don't know what's ahead, it's holding on to someone. Even when you're not sure you have the strength to. Life isn't always fair. There are losses that can't be undone. Memories that never truly fade. But maybe what matters isn't what you've lost. It's what you choose to keep. You keep your kindness. You keep your faith. You keep a place for someone else, even when your own heart hasn't fully healed. Because sometimes, family isn't where you begin, but where you decide not to walk away. And if there's one thing this story leaves behind, maybe it's this: we can't always change the past, but we can always choose who we become after it. And maybe one day, when you're standing in front of a difficult choice, you'll remember this story, not to find an answer, but to remember that, as long as you don't turn away, sometimes that's enough to begin again.